Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to episode 32, Fashioning the Metaverse to Accelerate Digital Transformation, What Has Gone Out of Style. This webinar forms a part of the ITU Digital Transformation Webinar Series, and it's being organized by ITU together with the International Metaverse Council. My name is Apurva Bose, and I'm the Program Coordinator for G20 Global Land Initiative, UNCCD, and it is my absolute pleasure to be your MC for this session. Now, immersive technologies like the Metaverse have entered the fashion industry and transformed the way we experience fashion by paving the way for brands to engage with customers, generate revenue, and showcase their products in the digital space. Now, by enabling the creation of digital avatars, customers can now try on clothes, try on accessories from different brands across the world without even having the burden of traveling. But does Metaverse have an impact beyond this? Can there be an impact to the fashion industry beyond all of this? Now, that's going to be the crux of the discussion today. Now, before we delve into the heart of our discussions, please take note of how the session will be run. All questions from the audience will be taken during the Q&A session after the presentation. Participants can submit their questions by typing in the Q&A window. Now, the Q&A icon can be seen at the bottom of your screen. Please indicate the city and country you're connecting from while doing so. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the event website. The presentation will also be made available on the website. Now, to begin today's webinar, I'd like to pass the floor to Cesar Uno Sa, Telecommunication Standardization Bureau Director, for the opening remarks. Over to you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, panelists, I'm delighted to welcome you all to episode 32, Fashioning the Metaverse to Accelerate Digital Transformation, What Has Gone Out of Style. This webinar forms a part of ITU's ongoing Digital Transformation webinar series. We are pleased to be organizing this webinar with the International Metaverse Council. The Metaverse ecosystem is still evolving. The application of the Metaverse across various industries, including fashion, is still being explored. The Metaverse offers a unique opportunity to create and customize digital avatars, which can try on virtual clothing and accessories from different corners of the world. Leveraging Metaverse, brands and designers can create virtual clothing collections and establish virtual stores in which customers using their avatars can try on virtual clothing and make purchases based on their preferences. Dior, the fashion company, is already in the process of launching their Metaverse ecosystem to promote an interactive branded experience for their customers. The Metaverse could also enable digital fashion shows with avatars of models on virtual runways to showcase latest designer brand creations for a wider audience without limitations associated with the need of physical presence. In this regard, the Metaverse Fashion Week on Decentraland has been organized since 2022 with several brands, including Tommy Hilfiger, Dolce & Gabbana, and DKNY, being part of the show. The adoption of the Metaverse in fashion may vary depending on how the technology develops and how customer behaviors evolve. Fashion industry stakeholders will need to adapt to these changes and explore new ways to engage with customers in the Metaverse. Metaverse as a concept can also have far-reaching socio-economic impacts across domains, including fashion. These aspects are being further explored within the ITU focus group on Metaverse. The third focus group on Metaverse meeting will be held in Geneva, Switzerland, from 3 to 5 October 2023. Feel free to join us either online or on-site for this meeting. Today, we are joined by fashion experts to take us on a new journey of Metaverse, which has the potential to shape brand visibility, brand commerce, social media influence, and even set fashion trends of the future. I'm keenly looking forward to hearing more on this interesting topic. I would like to thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisa, for your thought-provoking words, which I'm sure will feed into the discussions that we have lined up today. I'd really like to encourage the audience to type in any questions that you may have, and our panelists will do their best to answer them during the Q&A session. Now, I'm super excited for this session as much as you are, as we have a fantastic lineup of panelists for this webinar. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Samruddhi Shur, Director, Meta Asset Research Center, the Metaverse Council, who will be moderating the session. Over to you, Samruddhi.
Thank you so much, Apurva, for your kind words and the kind introduction. I'm very much excited for this session. Today we have with us the industry veterans, and I'll be your moderator today. So without further ado, we would be beginning the introductions of our luminous speakers for today. So first we have Ms. Claire Tattersall, the CEO and founder of Digital Fashion Week. Then we have with us Ms. Sasha Wallinger, the founder of Blockchain Style Lab, and the force innovation and foresight strategist for several different brands. And then we have with us Ms. Hollywood, the founder and CEO of Hollywood Labs. So, hi everyone, how are you all?
Hey, Samruddhi, really great, thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, hi, lovely to see you all.
Hi. So, yes. So now we have with us our first question, which begins with, please introduce yourself. We would love to know more about your journeys, how did you actually come into this industry of fashion and metaverse? You have seen the evolution of this industry from the very scratch. So how exactly did that happen? If you can brief us about that, it would be amazing.
Yeah, so did you want me to go first, Samruddhi?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, I'm Claire Tattersall. I'm the founder of Digital Fashion Week. So I want to say, first of all, I'm really honored to be here with you, Samruddhi, and with Holly and Sasha. You know, you're really significant voices in fashion, in Web3, in the metaverse. So I'm very excited to have this conversation as well. It's always lovely to talk to you. So just a brief note on what is Digital Fashion Week. It's immersive experiences. It's about the digitalization of the fashion industry. It's not just about digital fashion as an end-use wearable. And we create immersive experiences that are based on 3 pillars. One is thought leadership, and innovation and creativity, and bringing the community together. It's a very important part of that, similar to what you're doing, you know, having these conversations, including the audience as well, because I think what's really new for the future and what we see happening in the metaverse is the voice of the audience is very, very important, and also how they're contributing to what Web3 and the metaverse and fashion actually is in these places. I've been in digital fashion since 2009, my previous company. I launched Thunder Lily, we were working on a concept of sketch to launch in 24 hours at zero cost, working with independent designers, building a virtual platform where they could design, create, produce and sell all in the virtual space. So yeah, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much for this introduction, Claire. I would also like the audience to know that the Digital Fashion Week, which is the organization run by Claire, is running in New York, Milan, and London, and now they're also expanding to Paris, I believe. And I hope I'm correct, Claire.
So we're not in Milan yet. We have talks for Milan, looking at Lagos as well, because in Nigeria, in fact, the whole of Africa, there's incredible talent, and in the Middle East, we're looking at as well. So yeah, it's, moving, expanding, and working with different communities. Yes, thank you.
That's amazing. That's great. Moving on to our next speaker introduction, Ms. Holly. Would you like to please introduce yourself and your journey? Yes. How are you?
Thank you so much. So I'm Holly Wood. I'm CEO and founder of Hollywood Labs. I've been in the creative industries for the past 20 plus years, working with lots of fashion brands, luxury houses, and artists. The thing that really drew me to the innovation space was the opportunities for artists to use blockchain technology. I've always been someone who's kind of like connected artists to new opportunities. And so I suppose when I kind of discovered blockchain and NFTs is where it kind of first started. I think back in like 2021, I'm looking at my calendar. It was like the dawn of something very, very new. And I kind of like explored for a long time before sharing with any of the artists that I was working with. But really it was through NFTs that I sort of discovered my, real interest in blockchain technology. And I think it's a very interesting moment in time, because we've seen this kind of growth of the NFT space, and that's kind of given birth to a lot of new creative talent, in the digital fashion space. But now we have new technologies, from AI to AR, VR. Of course, AR and VR have been around for a lot longer, but we're sort of seeing something very interesting happening at the moment. And I think a lot of fashion brands are starting to explore how they can really harness this new technology. So whether your background is Web3, blockchain, or, from the coding space before anything was even called Web3, some of the artists that I've been working with have been kind of experimenting and exploring with these technologies for a really long time. Digital fashion is just literally at its very, very early beginning. And I was like amazed to hear, Claire, that you were already working in this space from like 2019. It's incredible. So yeah, super excited to be here. But that's a little bit about my background, and I'll hop on to what we have coming up in Paris later on this month also.
That's amazing to hear. If I'm in Paris, I'd definitely love to meet you. So next we have with us Sasha. Hello, Ms. Sasha, how are you? And I would like the audience to know that it's 5 a.m. in the morning at Sasha's place, and her commitment towards digital fashion and metaverse is commendable. I don't know anyone who'd wake up at 5 a.m. for a webinar. So hats off to you, Sasha. And
thank you.
Please enlighten us about your journey, your experience in digital fashion and metaverse.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here today, and truly honored to be a member of this esteemed panel. I look at my co-panelists. And I think, Claire, you've done so much within the digital fashion space as a whole. You should really take a bow, because you've just come from an amazing series of digital fashion weeks, which I've been following avidly from my armchair. And Holly, you've done so much for creativity in this space, and I think that really unites what this whole world is about. I mean, I always think about Web3 as developing this space for community, this nurturing ecosystem for creativity. And I think I will add to that in the sense of what I do is I bring collaborations about. I've always called myself a hidden connections detective, even though I've held other roles in different various titles. That's really what I'm doing. I'm bringing about very unexpected partnerships and collaborations across somewhat previously unthought. Claire, 2009 is you're gonna absolutely lap me in that respect, but areas that I don't think were necessarily thought to integrate together. And I think that's what's so interesting about what we're speaking about today, is that these are potentially unexpected zones, technology and fashion. I came into the fashion space via sustainability. I came in through the lens of sustainable fashion, working on systems change within the entire supply chain industry in a sense of sustainability, and working through that into environmental and social responsibility in fashion. And I think there I learned that there was this enormous potential for fashion to be adaptive and a change agent. And it is such an enormous indicator of global business that when those intersections occur, there's quite a bit of money that transpires based on that. So that's where I really felt like there could be a lot of change in the space, and I was enthusiastic in the sustainable place, and worked for big brands like H&M, Nike, various ad agencies and such. But really started the Blockchain Style Lab, which I'm the founder and CEO of, because I wanted to understand more. That's the reason it's called a lab. And I think that the pursuit of understanding more is what's driven me to becoming this innovation and foresight strategist in this world, because I'm honestly just, trying to continually learn more and learn while doing, frankly. And I think that's really the spirit of the digital fashion space. You mentioned Metaverse Fashion Week in your opening remarks. It's really interesting to think we've now had two, and there's just so much more to do. So I am absolutely a passionate champion of this industry, because it creates opportunity for so many, and that's what I really enjoy. And the accolades aside, I think it's really a amazing community, and it's absolutely something I would always get up for 5 a.m. at. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Sasha, for your lovely introduction. So for today, the first question that I'd like to ask you all, and most importantly, Claire, you have been working in the digital fashion space since 2019, and you understand it better than most of us. So how do you think that people are perceiving and consuming fashion as of now, through metaverse, through digital fashion, through emerging technology? What has changed?
So I want to say that we're very definitely not at sort of any endpoint. We're constantly in flux at the moment. I think there is a difference between innovators and the broad audience. The broad audience is beginning to understand that they can have a layered experience. There's also a difference between digital natives and people who are very, very used to a traditional fashion industry. It's been really exciting every season, and we work in parallel with the traditional fashion industries as well. So every season, every February and every September, looking at how the work of the designers has improved so much. Every season, massive leaps forward. There's also massive leaps forward in the number of different softwares and technologies that they need to get on board with and learn. So it's a really, really broad subject in a way. There are so many different technologies that you could use, that you can incorporate to engage with your audience. And that's what it's really about. It's about having a brand vision and knowing how you want to engage with your audience and where you want to engage with your audience. Looking at something that very, very clearly came out of this September, which finished 2 days ago. This September's events was gaming. So looking at, and it is actually, games in both Web 2 and Web 3 are really significant. We can talk about some numbers later, but there are incredible opportunities for designers. I see designers who are in their teens, who are already building their own businesses, who already have a very significant income by creating digital assets and selling them in the metaverse for people to wear. And looking at, is this the metaverse where we're holding meetings, or is it a metaverse where people are playing? So I look forward to further on in the conversation, really doing deeper dives into really what the metaverse is, but amazing opportunities for designers. And it's really exciting to see where this is going.
Thank you so much, Claire. So, Holly, now following on what Claire just said, that the space is developing, and every year, every season, we're actually seeing new designers come in. Do you think that brands are also following the similar suit, considering that you have worked with several different brands and established designers as well to help them transition into Metaverse? What would you say what is their take on this industry, the Metaverse and the virtual reality and the games, of course?
Yeah, I suppose the thing I was going to pick up on from what Claire was mentioning was really this idea that actually there is no end to this exploration. We are just going to keep evolving and refining and exploring. I was having a conversation with Rayan from Cyber, which was a really fantastic metaverse space that was a real groundbreaking kind of pioneer very, very early on. They started off with a very crude kind of metaverse. You could only, do very limited things in terms of hosting exhibitions with your NFT art. And later they really sort of spearheaded the idea of e-commerce in a metaverse environment. They were one of the first kind of metaverses to enable different blockchain purchases directly within their metaverse. And even yesterday, Rayan was saying how actually they are not motivated by just growing as this bigger kind of metaverse company the whole time. They want to innovate. They want to be part of conversations around what's happening in AI. So this idea that, we have this kind of like one model and that's the thing that everyone has to jump onto. It doesn't really work like that, although I'm not really seeing that. And I think that's why brands are really kind of experimenting, or I've kind of seen the biggest return of when brands are experimenting and being playful. So the fact that Gucci jumped into Roblox so early, it's kind of like a testament to how progressed they are in their kind of thinking around what the opportunities are. I think it's very easy for brands to kind of do a lot of research and development internally, but until you're actually participating, until you're really up close to that audience, and that's where the learning is happening. And I think that's what you were talking about at the beginning about, engaging audiences in the conversation. So yeah, that's kind of something that I have noticed.
Thank you so much, Holly. I'd be following up on what you just said, that the best in the returns comes when brands are being experimental and playful and they're trying out new things. So, Sasha, my next question to you would be that what kind of new business models are coming up through these experimentation? And Holly, you're welcome to follow on this as well. So what I'm trying to understand here is, are there any new business models that are coming up inside the Metaverse and the fashion segment? Or are there new business models coming up in the metaverse as a whole, which almost any brand from any sector could take up? So, Sasha, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah.
So at Blockchain Style Lab, I probably didn't do the best job explaining what I do, but I can answer your question by doing so. In the sense of brands, large and small, bring us into their really their innovation kitchen to understand how they can jump into an ecosystem like the metaverse. And really, when they're doing that, they're asking the question of how they can connect with a new audience or a new consumer in a new and different way. As a former chief marketing officer, I think I gave a talk in 2021 where I said the CMO, the chief marketing officer role, is nextly becoming the chief metaverse officer. And why I said that was because those are the types of conversations that I'm having now with different clients, agencies, designers, people that that they're asking the questions around how can we get involved? What do we do to get involved? What is the business case to get involved? And I think what's so interesting about this is that really the answer to your question is within the question. Frankly, these brands that had been very stagnant, very risk averse, very concerned about connecting in a digital space with their audiences. Holly, you mentioned Gucci. I was lucky enough to be the CMO at Super Plastic when we did the Super Gucci NFT, and to have the conversation over time with a brand like Gucci to begin to introduce them into this not only NFT space, but the community that surrounds it, in the sense of building up a Discord channel and understanding what the audience would want to, what a Gucci audience would want to have in their mind as they potentially shopped for an item, which we eventually made a phygital item, so a physical and digital item. Those types of questions are questions across the organization that loop different individuals from various previously thought of silos, break those silos down. And an example is in that sense, the technologist gets to speak with a designer to understand what a runway show is going to look like in conjunction with a digital asset or a digital ecosystem, or even the e-com site, which is something that hasn't been really considered in the context of creativity to this extent before. So I think what's really exciting about this, and I agree with my co-panelists that we're just getting started, what's really exciting is that there is this ability to come to the table with different questions across an organization, like a large atelier, a 100-year-old like Gucci, or a small designer who's starting up, who's inquisitive and passionate and wants to get their message across. And maybe it's not cut and sew that's their first endeavor at this point, or a physical runway. Maybe it's Metaverse Fashion Week and they get an exposure there that they can absolutely skyrocket over the course of a creative life cycle. So I just think it's really inspiring to talk about themes of accessibility, talk about themes of education, and then absolutely, I'm always pro pushing the boundaries and developing creativity from a variety of different lenses. And I think that that's something that, having worked in, I mentioned systems change and sustainability, I'm seeing a second wave of a huge systems change at this point in time at brands through this lens of digital fashion. And I'll just close by saying, you asked, what other industries can this be applied to? I don't just work in the fashion space. I think, health and wellness are extraordinarily interesting in this regard. And there are many communities that I think that industry-wide that you can take these types of learnings into and shift and learn about how to see your business through a very different lens. Maybe it's down aging a brand, maybe it's connecting with a community or market segment that you could have never thought possible. I really believe that the opportunities are endless, and I think that's what's so invigorating about this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Sasha. So I would be following up with the same question with Holly. And so Holly, I think Sasha gave a very good perspective to us about this question about how different brands are actually using Metaverse. And she also mentioned about how Gucci did it, and that like the chief marketing officer, this very position is turning into the chief Metaverse officer. So would you say, Holly, that we're having a new business model when it comes to Metaverse? Or would you say that it's becoming more of a new marketing strategy for brands? to connect with the audience?
I think that, initially it was kind of challenging for brands to work out where this actually kind of sat within their company structure, because a lot of budget and resources is traditionally within like the marketing budget, but it doesn't necessarily always sit very neatly within their plans and expectations or expertise. I think where I'm seeing it being really impactful is where brands are actually developing highly skilled individual teams, and they're looking at how innovation can cover across their organization. So for instance, it can be around authentication, it can be about experience, it can be about loyalty. And Sasha, I was going to say the other role that I think has kind of like morphed from CMO is CEO. I know, for instance, there are now chief experience officers. And I was, just thinking a little bit about that super plastic project you did, because I think that was like the first Gucci Web3 project, the super plastic one.
Yes, they had been in the ecosystem Roblox first, but then this was a super plastic NFT, so that was taking their taking to a different extent.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing, and what I loved about it, that it was very holistic. So you had this experience. They did pop-up stores. There was definitely one in London. I feel like there was another one somewhere else, but you had this real kind of like moment of. And we have to remember like the context of just coming out of COVID, or that some of those restrictions still applying, where we had like the invitation or the creative impetus to experience a new brand, be a new collaboration, something really playful and totally different. It was a very different conversation, and then to be kind of invited to have an actual in-store experience as a special guest of Gucci. It was really, really, it was a great iteration from them. And I think you've kind of like seen others roll out similar, I know Lacoste have been doing really exciting things, again, IRL and Metaverse experiences. And the other industry I was going to mention, I think the health and wellness, I'm really excited about the opportunity that I created a gallery space in Spatial, and it was specifically for female curators and female artists to be able to show their work, because of course Metaverse gives us this incredible opportunity to level the playing field in so many ways, but we really need to see like the technology being made. There's so much around what we need to do to make that a more even a space. But yeah, having the gallery space in Spatial was a real kind of like eye-opening opportunity for like the different types of conversations that we could actually have in there. And I think it's been amazing actually in terms of like different pioneers that you've seen develop in this space, the Metaverse brands that have really, really committed to their vision and have like, the developments that they've made in each separate team, but also this comes from an open source sharing community. So you do see lots of kind of collaboration between Journey, Spatial, Sandbox, for instance. So the learnings hopefully I think will be accelerated because of this kind of like attitude to opening up these networks.
Thank you so much, Holly. So now we will be moving on to our next question. And the question that I have with me is, how do you think that gaming is going to impact the metaverse and the fashion industry? Do you think that fashion, because I saw Fortnite collaborating with a lot of different designers to design the outfits for their characters, their in-game characters, and also the characters for the player. We saw that Ready Player Me, which is a very one of the most popular integrations in a lot of Web3 games. They are partnering up with different designers to, introduce their clothing lines as a digital clothing line for their avatars. And Claire, I am aware that you have partnered with Epic Studios as well for your fashion shows. So yes, please do enlighten us. How do you think that gaming is going to change the metaverse and fashion dynamics as we know right now?
Yeah, I love this question. The answer is it's already started changing it. You talked about Unreal, and yes, so Unreal and Epic Games, they already have a relationship with Clo. They already are building relationships with other 3D softwares as well for fashion. So this is going to be an amazing opportunity to create, develop your marketplace, etc. in the future. If we just look at some numbers here, so Fortnite has over 952,000 concurrent players. Sandbox has 3.1 thousand daily users. Zepeto has 1.5 million user created items that are sold daily, and Roblox has 66.1 million daily users. I mean, these are numbers that we really cannot ignore. And can I actually just address a question that somebody in the audience has asked? So Frank asked me, do I think gaming could be a way to make metaverse spaces more attractive? So I think it's a really good time to actually answer this question as well. Yes, gaming is in the metaverse. Are we talking about the metaverse as really a Web3, it's got to be built on blockchain? Or are we talking about the metaverse as a place where we can enter an XR experience? So I embrace all of these metaverse spaces. They are not part of one metaverse unless they're Web3 that is linked by a wallet. But I think we should not ignore those that are outside of the Web3. I think these XR metaverse spaces are really, really, really valuable to designers. I think gaming is an excellent place to look. In Roblox, you can create your own shop. Sandbox is about creating and sharing. These are just really obvious places for designers to be. However, what I would say is, don't just jump on this bandwagon. Oh, I need to create a metaverse space. Oh, I should build my shop in there. How does it fit in with your brand strategy? It's like anything you do. If you open a bricks and mortar store, you really need to do market research. You need to look at what the traffic is in that area, what the costs are going to be. I think that's something we need to think about constantly with any decisions that we're making in the fashion industry. What is the value that it brings to you as a brand? How does your brand interact with that audience as well? And that's going to help you choose which metaverse space you're in. Are you going to build something in spatial that you can invite your unique community into to hold experiences? And spatial creates these really, really accessible spaces for artists and designers to build their own worlds. So I think it's very important to dial everything back and look at what is your brand strategy and where do you want to go with this and how do you want to reach people? But yeah, very, very exciting opportunities.
Do you mind if I just...
No, absolutely. Yes, please, Holly.
I was just going to say, in terms of the opportunities, I'm such a strategic thinker also. I can't help always think about actually the different audiences and different markets that there are. And because you open yourself up to this global network, it's really worth kind of paying attention to, for instance, if you were going to go down a blockchain route, where are the audiences that have adopted specific blockchains? So for instance, Avalanche as a blockchain is huge in Asia. So if you're interested in attaining a kind of a Korean or Japanese audience, Avalanche could be a really interesting ecosystem for you. You tend to find kind of groups that are orientated towards specific chains as such. Tezos is consistently marketed themselves as the most sustainable and green eco chain. I think they're a lot more than that. They absolutely are, the most sustainable. I agree with that statement. But I also think that they have, incredible impact in terms of what they've done with the creative and artist community, for instance. So yeah, just in terms of opportunities, I think, being really strategic and thinking about where those markets are, and you have like a much bigger opportunity, I think, as a young or as a small business, in my mind, because you're so much more agile. So a lot of the brands, they are so slow. They find it very difficult to kind of have these conversations across each different team. You can pivot and become, build something very quickly as a small team or even an individual. So there's massive opportunity here for young or emerging digital fashion brands. I really think there's a huge kind of like gap right now, that for the right brand, for me personally, what we're not seeing at the moment in digital fashion is creative direction. I think if you had an incredible fashion brand with an amazing team of creatives around it, it could even be a collective, it could be a DAO, it doesn't need to be one individual. We're seeing that much more at couture houses now, where they're bringing in guests and collaborations like Raf Simons and Miuccia Prada that has been so successful. So think kind of like in a new way, rather than looking at adopting past or previous kind of like growth or go-to-market strategies. This is like the opportunity to do something super exciting.
That's very true. And I do believe that every business has an opportunity in this space to build something new, something innovative, and come up with their own fresh perspective and add more value to the space. And also, Claire, you very well put this thing that Metaverse is not just a hype word that every brand should try to capitalize on just because it looks nice. To say that we have a Metaverse, that should not be the reason of actually creating a Metaverse. How does it fit in your brand strategy? That's definitely the most important thing. And I feel that during the early days of, let's say, 2021 and the early 2022, brands were definitely jumping on this Metaverse wagon without exactly thinking twice of how exactly they can drive value out of it. Most of them started by creating, spaces in spatial, buying land in Sandbox. And also, if I remember correctly, they all had their own NFT collections for the community, which they did not have at that moment. But it was super exciting to see them do all of those things, because suddenly Metaverse was the it thing. And then Meta changed its name to Meta. So every Metaverse became Meta's verse in a way. And now we have generative AI. That's the it word of this year. And this is now, right now, I see it happen a lot. Being someone who's in the Metaverse space, brands come up to us and say, hey, Metaverse is cool, but what can we do with generative AI? Like, can we build something with it? So, and when we ask them about what value are you looking forward from this generative AI and the Metaverse and all of that, we don't know. It would be good for the PR, So that's exactly the kind of statements. I'm exactly imitating the words that they have told us and my team. It's very interesting to see how they're working around these new emerging technologies. But it's up to us as strategists, as the teams who are actually building in this space for a lot of time, to give them the perspective and to shape the market in general, at large. So following on that, Sasha, you have worked with a lot of brands. You have worked with a lot of established brands. How do you see these brands utilizing this opportunity called Metaverse and digital fashion?
Yeah, I love that question, and I love your very true statement on how people are coming through what I call in the Web3 galaxy. So I have in my little description, but I'll just give you a tease that, there's this whole ecosystem around Web3. So that encompasses not only the metaverse, but we've talked about NFTs, we've talked about AI, we've talked about digital fashion and different tools and blockchain to come through this true galaxy of Web3. The planets of such are something like a metaverse. And when you were asking the previous question around the intersection between metaverse and gaming, I really thought about my own progress, how on earth did I get here? I am not a technologist. I have no bend towards that tool. I really am a creative creator physically. But I think what's so interesting is I'm in the United States. When I was a child, we had this game called Fashion Plates where you could stencil basically the fashion figures. And so if you were interested in fashion whatsoever, you did a little stencil and then you could color it in and you could design it on your own. And I think it was for those of us that maybe weren't as facile with their drawing, an aid to developing a collection. And then, taking that into, design and thinking about that was in one regard a technology. It was a very nascent technology. It didn't require any, computer or such, but it was imagining the progress of how fashion could be both, provided to people across the globe in a very simple way. And we've been doing things like that with dolls and, a variety of different dress wear and in small scale throughout many cultures, throughout many generations is what I'm aware of. So I think taking that model and superimposing that into something like Nintendo's upcoming Fashion Dreamer launch, which is so interesting to me. And I've been following both as a fan of somebody who got their gaming start with Super Mario Brothers, way back when. But now this Fashion Dreamer concept is coming about, hopefully, to launch a next generation or new generation to understand how they can be not only a fashion creator, but also a fashion business owner. And I think that that's really important to enter into this conversation. What we're talking about, I mean, I think Holly and Claire and I really believe in creativity and community and collaboration, but there is this organism of the business of fashion that's fueling a furthered conversation across the industry that is so dependent on so many different global tools, whether it's supply chain, whether it's different transference of resources, you fill in the dots. And certainly the consumer and consumption process, which from a sense of circularity, we've taught about maybe buying less, but now we're thinking about how can we buy digitally and what does that look like? So I think that's really important. I just worked with the brand Camille Louis Jewelry, who launched their first jewelry collection on spin fashion towards a 360 circular economy. And I think that that's a really interesting way to think about how brands, and this is a woman who came from Cartier, but really wanted to create on her own a whole collection, because I think probably in part the smaller organization and the system of an actual atelier, a fashion house, a design lab wasn't big enough for the ideas that can be developed in this whole metaverse space. So I think the opportunity that metaverse presents for brands large and small, again, to connect with an audience, you can, this Fashion Dreamer audience is going to be really excited to understand, just to play a Nintendo Switch game, right? And to introduce the technology of commerce and the understanding of how that whole design ecosystem comes to life is a really lovely way to, in a gamified ecosystem, is a really lovely way to bring users on a journey and bring, I don't even like saying users, actually, like fans into a journey. And I think we're talking about brand side, the evolution of fandom and the evolution of what I call fashion-tainment. I hope that's an okay term. I've seen it a couple of times, so I'm getting, like a little bit of a nod. But we're thinking about this interplay. In US, we just had the Sphere open up in Vegas, and this is an immersive experience where people can go to a concert and have a live band who's performing, but also see the backdrop in an extraordinarily immersive experiential way. They're almost put inside the video game to witness this type of really pivotal moment within how we are entertained. And so I'm of course thinking with my lens of, when do we see the next runway show in this type of way? And what I'm talking about, I guess, to round off the answer is this interplay between the physical and the digital. And I think that's what's really critical is I don't see the physical going away as the digital evolves. I think there's the opportunity to create a more circular and continued chain and dialogue from the perspective of a brand or creative individual with their audience. We got a little closer with Web 2 and social media, and now with Web 3, hopefully we can deepen that relationship and be able to explore from micro communities the opportunity that exists for the creator to get close to the consumer or to the fan. So that's my aspiration.
Sasha, I was so pleased that you brought up it's what's it called, the Sphere in Las Vegas. It looks incredible, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I loved about that is it's a collaborative effort, but one of the artists is Ez Devlin. And Ez Devlin is a British-based artist, creative director, and she's worked a lot with Louis Vuitton already. So I could very well imagine, for instance, those sort of immersive fashion experiences not being too far away. You also have incredible artists like Krista Kim, who are kind of already creating these whole holistic wellness spaces in her own metaverse, which is called Zero, which is incredible. And they've created actual whole new modes of transport to get you from A to B within the metaverse, and that journey in itself is like a completely incredible thing. And I was just going to touch on a little bit sneaker culture as well, and in terms of this sustainability and fashion, and where some opportunities are there. And again, for kind of like smaller brands, the metaverse is like an incredible space to like explore and test and learn with your audience directly. So creating digital sneakers is going to be so much more less cost prohibitive. This is where you kind of see a lot of co-creation happening. Even brands like Adidas and Nike, they have been developing their co-creation projects for some time. But I think the actual delivery of physical product is still really challenging. Some of the issues around freight and shipping, all of the kind of like really boring IRL things have been issues, I think, which is why it's exciting when you see a very small emerging 3D printing brand like Zellerfeld popping up, creating these brilliant kind of like 3D printed sustainable sneakers that lots of individuals are working with now. I think they're based in, I want to say Amsterdam. I think they're in Amsterdam. But those are the kinds of like new fashion brands that I'm kind of getting very excited to see emerge from this space, and how Metaverse can provide a kind of a moment, a test, like you said at the beginning, like your lab being your play space. It's kind of like we get to do that in the Metaverse.
Can I actually build on something that you just said as well, Holly, because I think you touched on a really, really important point, talking about health and wellness. And I think it's not just fashion events and fashion shopping experiences. Fashion is about how we express ourselves, how we dress ourselves, how we create the image of us. So it's across all events that we go to in the metaverse, when we're going to be having more business events, when we're going to be having more education in the metaverse, when we're going to health and wellness. How do we want to dress in there. And I think these are really amazing opportunities to look forward to for designers in the future. You're not just looking at having a fashion show or opening up a shop. You're looking at being in the real world, in the virtual world as well. And I kind of want to stop looking at having a real world versus a virtual world, and we have the world. It's the same way that when we're talking, we're all in different countries today, and we're not talking about, well, I'm having a digital conference. We're having a conference, and we're all dressed for this. So it's one world that we live in, and we dress in this world as well, and how we take that with us into different rooms effectively. So I love that you raised, the health and wellness in these other industries, because that's where fashion belongs, everywhere.
So it's actually becoming a very interesting conversation, and I would like to add a little bit more to this conversation. So when I came into this industry, the Metaverse specifically, my work was more experimental, more research oriented. I come from an electronics background, so I'm a more of a hardware person. And research is what I do day in and day out. It's more of a financial asset research as of now in Metaverse, but yeah, we have dealt with a lot of things. So coming back, the most interesting observation that we were working on back in early 2022 was a human computer interfaces. Now, it's very technical, but it sounds technical. It's actually a very easy concept, and it's something that Elon Musk is working on as of now. But I want your opinions on how this might pan out later on. They have begun their human trials on Neuralink this year. So Neuralink, for those who don't know about it, it's basically a computer chip which goes in your head, and whatever you can see on a computer screen or inside of your virtual reality glasses, you will be able to see it inside your head, because ultimately what you see through your eyes is interpreted by the brain when the image from the eyes goes into the brain. That's how you see. That's how the basic function of seeing works. Now imagine that you're able to see anything that's there. You're able to feel everything, because your brain can actually now sense things in the virtual reality. Those sensations, those sensory nerves are getting the required simulation through the chip that is implanted in your head. Now imagine that this experiment in Neuralink works out. How do you think the fashion industry could be impacted? Because you're not just looking at designs anymore. You're actually feeling the fabric. You can actually feel the environment. You can feel the wind. You can do everything that you can do in the real world. Would there be a boundary between digital and virtual? Right now, as we're speaking, this is not just a virtual conference, but this is just a conference. You said that there. But we do have a screen in between of us. We know that we cannot touch each other. We cannot shake hands. We cannot exactly see where we are in each other's places. So all of that could be possible in Metaverse, in the real sense, only when we can sense everything that we can sense in the real world. So what are your thoughts about this? I know it sounds a lot like science fiction, but we are technologists. That's what we do. We create science fiction into reality. So yeah, Claire, your thoughts.
Oh gosh. So I think the technology.
This was not a question I was planning.
I think it's an amazing, super exciting question. So I think it's really exciting. I think we've seen people with ocular implants who are able to hear. I think the opportunities for maybe people who are blind to be able to see. I would like to look beyond the hype to what value is. Part of me is a little horrified that, I'm very old school. I just had my ears pierced for the first time this summer. I don't really like the idea of things through my body, in my body at all. So it's not a super appealing idea for me. However, I love the idea of getting rid of the wires and the hardware and all of that, of having an emptier life. But I'm not sure for me having an implant is really an appealing road to achieve that. However, I think the technology is really amazing. I'm really excited about, glasses as opposed to goggles. I don't really like headsets that separate you from the world. I think the world is an absolutely amazing place. I love AR because it layers creativity on top of what already exists around us. And I think that's really beautiful and provides so many chances to, have art and interact with the world in new ways. So yeah, I would like to look at the real value beyond the hype with this. I think there are many things that we could bring to people who have a disability or, have some senses impaired, perhaps, that could really help them. And I think that would be amazing, but I'm really interested to see what the other panelists think about this.
Yes, Holly, what are your thoughts about this human-computer interface? And for the sake of simplicity, let's keep it as not an implant, as something that is a wearable, because I'm hoping it would transition into that. Otherwise, I know that half of the world's population would be afraid of actually using it. Well, there would be a lot of medical regulations.
That's what I was kind of thinking. I'm definitely more comfortable sitting in the disruptor camp than the futurist camp. So it takes me quite a long time to kind of really, I'm very focused on what's happening right now and in the very near future. And that for me feels like so far away. I want to have enough faith that we're actually going to get to the point where we actually reach that destination. For me, sustainability and what happens within the next, 5 to 10 years within the fashion space and global inclusivity is such an urgent kind of call to us all, I think. I love the fact, Claire, that you were talking about doing your next session in Lagos potentially. I think, there is without doubt incredible creativity on the continent. I was super lucky to work with several kind of Ghanaian artists, Ghanaian and Nigerian artists before, working with different brands. But I think there's other things that are kind of the glasses thing is super interesting. I think what I personally really want to try on a pair of Ray-Bans. I read a brilliant article by Megan at Vogue Business the other day, and she was really into the Ray-Ban glasses. So I'm really want to go and try those out. I kind of think for digital fashion designers like DressX, the way that they're working at Diesel, having those kind of opportunities, what does that mean when Ray-Ban kind of make that much more accessible, and it's not holding up your phone, it's kind of, it is like you say, it is a wearable kind of moment. So yeah, I think those are the things I'm excited about. I definitely wouldn't be having anything implanted. She says, come back to me in 10 years when I change my mind.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I have to say, I've got my pods in right now, where I remember when I'm old enough to remember the shift between no cell phones and cell phones came to life. People said, there'll be a cell phone implanted in your brain, and I thought, oh, that's awful. I'm much more of a maker, physical, sensory experience individual than a internal. But here they are. It's really nice to not, have my whole household hearing our conversation at 6 a.m. And there's a tool, right? And that's been the advent of technology. It's innovated. And I do come, I was thinking, Holly, when you were sharing, I come from the future place. Before I got into this work, in between sustainability and fashion, I was designing, in the hopes of making this happen. It didn't come to fruition, but fashion for outer space. because I think, that's the next ecosystem. That at that point was the next metaverse or ecosystem that we were going to be creating for. And so I'll share too that, I was yesterday, I have a small child, and I was at a birthday party in an arcade and sat down at one of the rides. And, it was a shoot 'em up ride, but it had haptics in the seat. And I just am sharing that, which means like it was rolling, it was going. There were other AR, VR experiential moments in other rides that I've been to, and seen. And I'm saying this because children are being introduced at a very young age to a different full scale interpretation of their sensory experiences. And when you were asking Mati the question around the sensory experiences, I think what's so interesting is that this sensory experiences is the reason why I became involved in fashion. My grandmother was a hat maker, and she taught me how to touch fabric. I understood the feel of fabric, a difference of linen and cotton and what have you. And so I think that there's a lot of potential for a tool like a Ray-Ban, or we just had MetaConnect here in the States in Silicon Valley, where we introduced there was an introduction of the Quest 3 headset and such. So there's a lot of different tools that are coming to play that I can think of, even from a designer perspective, having, not having to travel to faraway continents to see a fabric or some, textile that they'd want to include in the collection. You can just put on your glasses and see what could potentially be the cornerstone of what you're creating. I also think it's really important to remember that when we're talking about the senses, we're talking about the human body also being a technology and tool. I think that's really critical in this conversation. We're talking about health and wellness, and it's no accident that there's this extension from fashion. We talk sometimes about luxury fashion, but there's lifestyle brands and performance brands. And Holly, I think it was wise you mentioned sneaker culture, right? That there's these other intersection points in which people are coming to that which is worn and that which is consumed to be worn from a variety of different channels. And I'm referencing there the Nike Fuel Band that came out, it was around 2011, more popularized around 2014, where you could connect to your steps, your pedometer, into your sneaker. So I'm just bringing those examples to play and saying that this is not super new. It's new in how we're talking about the technologies, not in the, again, innovation kitchen lab, but we're talking about it externally, and we're talking about it with a consumer audience. We're also talking about it absolutely as a hype cycle. And I hope what this conversation can breed is not just the hype and technology for hype and technology's sake, but the opportunity to really gather together in a creative fashion to develop collaborations that can be, in these moments that could be hopefully more accessible to all from a more global audience. I mean, when we're seeing everybody's chat today, we have such a global audience who's curious and interested in this. That doesn't mean the technology is going to get to them lickety split. And so I think it's really important to think about the different ways that you can partake in these innovations. And I bet, some of the next designers for these technologies are in their personal kitchen innovation labs, considering how to bring them to life. And I really hope that the technology, like a glasses or, some of the things, again, the glasses Diane von Furstenberg had on her runway, I can't remember, it was 2014 too, but it was really early on. So I'm saying all this because I think there's a huge, massive opportunity for individuals to think along the trajectory that is the future. And of course, that's really where my bend is. But I think that we can walk back and understand that there's some really tangible moments that are happening now to physically and, I'm saying physically, sensorily stimulate an audience through that which we create in this space. And I think that that's very inspirational to me, aside from implants and such.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your views. I do understand that implants have a long way to go before they ever reach us. So yes, now my last question from all of you, would be, what are the challenges that you see as of now for the industry, with this industry, Metaverse, and for fashion? And where do you see this industry going in the next 5-10 years? So again, Claire, your thoughts.
So I think we're right at a transition point at the moment. I think we've had so much hype, and I'm a huge fan of hype. Hype gets ideas out there. Hype throws things against the wall and we see what sticks. Hype is marketing. And we have had a few years of hype, and I think it's been really fabulous to watch the creativity and the innovation that's happened in this space. But I think for the brands now, it's time to look at what is the real value, to dial everything back again to what is your brand? What is your brand promise? What is your brand strategy? And what do you want to do here? So I think a big challenge for many of the designers that I talk to is really knowing what is right for them. At the same time, we can see that through hype, different ideas come up to the surface. We've had sort of the metaverse rise up, bubble up, and then we've had generative AI, and a lot of people, as you know, we all talked about before, in the traditional fashion industry, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of levels of approval that have to happen before anyone can move forward with any changes. Whereas independent designers are nimble and they're agile. So I think this is really for both the audience and for the brands to work out what is important now, where are we going, and what do they want from that. I think it's a really, really good time for the innovators to push their ideas forward. I think it's an amazing time for the audience for looking at how we can together create a more sustainable fashion industry. And that's what, we haven't really dived deeply into this, although I think everybody here cares about it passionately and everybody's addressed it. But we have to look at how we can make the fashion industry a better place, how we can pollute less. And we can do that by having less physical assets and layering it with digital assets, by designing in the virtual space as well, rather than creating more IRL materials. How do we use less resources while we're designing? How do we use less water while we're designing? All of these. So I think a big challenge is for the big brands, how to decide how they're really going to move forward, and maybe move forward faster, and perhaps collaborate with the nimble, agile, independent designers and artists. And for small brands, really working out what is the direction that they want to go in. But it's a very exciting future.
Definitely sounds very exciting. Holly, I'm very much curious to hear your thoughts on where do you see the industry in the next 5-10 years.
I was sort of taking a few notes when Claire was talking, because there is so many ways to answer this question, but I was really kind of like thinking about, for brands, how can we make this different? If I was a brand, how can we make this different? This is an opportunity. It's a really rare opportunity to develop new revenue streams, onboard new audiences, and how to not slip back into your comfort zone. I'm kind of seeing that a little bit at the moment. I think, like you say, Claire, there has been like all of this kind of hype, and the brands that have been kind of like engaging during that hype phase are now a little bit more cautious and more like struggling to kind of see where the opportunities are, because they're measuring it based on very old parameters, very old KPIs. For me, I kind of, I really encourage, like you say, that collaborative nature. I think it is just such an opportunity to do things differently. But what is it that we want to do differently? You know, if we really mean that we want to be inclusive, that has to become like a core principle, and it has to sit at the very front of everything that you do. And it's kind of, you know, it's not for one season only. What does that actually look like in terms of your structure? And these are like big goals. They're big challenges. None of this is going to happen in one season, 1 year. You know, I'm kind of excited to see when, you know, bigger entities like Selfridges have very sort of far-reaching targets that are challenging for themselves. You know, how do they take this traditional retail model and contribute to a conversation around sustainability when their whole business model and business purpose is to support consumers? So, you know, they started that conversation, I think 2 years ago, and they're, you know, into this kind of like 5-year sort of project there. I see the metaverse being something that can really feed into a lot of these conversations, whether that's blockchain, whether it's through gaming. I don't think that's the kind of like the important part for me. The important part is, you know, fashion has always been, it's a creative industry that is very similar to an artistic practice. For me, if it's working really well, it's working really well for a multitude of people. And to be able to experience and engage in the industry that we call fashion, you know, it should be a joy, it should be a pleasure. You know, for so many of us, I personally really do not like shopping. I hate the experience of shopping, believe it or not. I absolutely loathe the whole thing of shopping. So for me, digital fashion makes fashion playful again, makes it creative. It kind of makes me enjoy how I'm kind of like experiencing the designers, the tools that they're using. So I'm hoping that we're going to continue to see this emergence of a new kind of like creative generation.
That's very true, that digital fashion is definitely going to add an element of innovation. And I've heard that Claire and you are very much focused that if the brands are supposed to use Metaverse, specifically the fashion brands, in the next 5 to 10 years, then they have to be very much focused on value creation and what exactly do they bring into the lives of the people or their community in general. And I think that this statement is true for almost every business and everything that we do. If you don't add value to something, you're not exactly doing anything. I mean, that's not work. So you're getting the returns only when you're creating some kind of value for the public in general. And adding on to that as well, I think the value creation that can be done in this area of digital fashion and metaverse is mainly threefold. We can have three main advantages in this. One is that the brands will get to connect with Gen Z. And Gen Z is very community centric because they all want to identify with certain values and they have their own value system. So every individual have their own way of expressing things, and that is something that can be harnessed best through the metaverse. And if brand wants to target these new upcoming generations, which are highly innovative, highly expressive, very individualistic, they have to be in something that is like metaverse, something that utilizes Web3, something that provides ownership of their creations and then realizing that virtually. That's one. Second, I feel that what is the best use case of metaverse? The best use case of metaverse that I've seen while consulting all the brands that I've worked with and the different designers that I've worked with. So one thing that they want to do is they want to collaborate with the new cities that are coming up. So mainly smart cities. So one collaboration that I see is for the brands to actually be a part of smart cities, which are not exactly habited as of now. They are in the process of developing, but they still have their presence in those new areas, which is like really far off from the actual city. And they can have their stores, they can have their storefronts all the way there. And Metaverse provides that experience. So it doesn't matter if you are in the middle of nowhere, you can still experience the joy of shopping. And lastly, I think the one thing that is coming up through this entire Metaverse, Web3, all of this new emerging technologies is the innovation. It's just interesting to do things in a certain way, and it's more convenient. And if we agree to the implant system that is coming up, it would be really, really seamless. You won't feel anything on your face. It could be better than the glasses. That's what we have seen in the research, but I'm very well aware that it would have a huge amount of resistance, like everything else we have had in the past. So I'm not really worried about the future. The future seems bright for this industry. But yes, I do remember that we still have to hear out Sasha's thoughts. Sasha, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think you make a good point. I love Claire and Holly what you shared too, and really, I think what it inspired me to think of is that when you're asking where the potential in the future for this space is, I really am always going to be a champion of the entrepreneur. And I think while brands and designers are investing in this space, and they're not slowing down, I have to share that, dispel that myth. There is maybe a calculated pause in certain regards, but I don't think they're slowing down. So I think this whole terrain that we're discussing today around the evolution of digital fashion is only picking up pace. And so I say that because I think that, the entrepreneurial ecosystem that can be built around the business of digital fashion is extraordinarily vast. I think we touched upon it a little bit earlier, but there's so many different areas to create new businesses functioning around, even how to onboard on wallets, we're talking about the metaverse. To me, that is very much a gaming ecosystem. But a lot of times people don't game, and they don't know how to interact in a gaming space. Holly, I love that you shared that you don't care to shop in physical presence, but I think that's a great case in point. I can think of, like, I've always wanted to meet. There's some, right, but the virtual stylist and people who can really be that translator for the designer or the collection to the consumer. And that's not just a marketeer. That's somebody who can really talk about, in US we have, Legally Blonde movie, where Cher had a closet, a virtual closet, or excuse me, it's physical closet, a real closet that you could just select what your look was going to be for that day. We've built that in the metaverse now. It exists, and it is quickly translating into the physical. Think about the many different modalities of shipping and distribution channels. And I think, again, I'm feeling the sustainability essence from my co-panelists. So how do we optimize those different areas so that we can make them more environmentally and socially responsible? So I really feel like, as a champion of entrepreneurship and a champion of the craftsperson and the creator, I think there's a lot of different business opportunities that are distinctly able to be developed and grown in this place and time. So that's what continues to inspire me as I work at brands large and small. The different tributaries that will come out of these different business cases that we're developing, and then I think that next gen of creator, I think that's really enlivening. And I hope some of you are here today listening to us and become inspired, not just from us, but from the huge potential for this industry to create almost, many different new industries as well.
Thank you so much, Sasha. It's lovely to hear from you all today. And as we end this conversation, I would like all of you to actually answer a few questions from the audience as well. So we have with us Frank. To all the panelists, we keep hearing Web3 as if it is Web2 plus something. However, spaces used as metaverses such as Spatial, Roblox, Record Room, Minecraft are not Web3 related, as NFTs aren't really used much, especially by general audience. Why would metaverse use cases need Web3 for the general public? So, anyone would like to take up this question?
I would say the simple answer would be that they don't need to have a Web3 element. I think that's, a lot of people refer to it as, you know, Web 2.5 or most of the fashion brands really are actually developing their metaverse strategies within Web 2 gaming spaces, ecosystems. So I don't think it needs to be Web3 related, but I do see huge opportunity for blockchain powered ecosystems, but the e-commerce side is the crucial part. So you need to make sure whichever ecosystem you're going to be working within, that the e-commerce is fully kind of integrated.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Holly. You don't have to be anything. It really is a matter, again, of doing what's best for you. I feel completely Web 2, Web 3 agnostic in terms of metaverse experiences. I think there are some things, we're in a bit of a difficult phase at the moment with what we think about Web3 and what we think about NFTs. You know, NFTs were the hot topic in 2020, and there's certain things that have sort of crashed, and you know, there have been some issues around crypto as well that have made people really back off. But I think we should very, very much look at the blockchain technology. I think on-chain technology is really valuable for artists and creators. Having agency over what happens to their product, how many of these products are sold, where they're sold, how they're sold, what happens with resale, for the luxury industry, proving authenticity. I think there's a lot of positives. I think the overall concepts have had a bit of a bad rap recently. I think we will very, very much move beyond that, because for artists of any kind, it's not just fashion designers. I think there's a lot of value that can be brought to you by being on chain. So I think we'll turn around and we'll see a future. But yeah, it's do what's best for you.
So thank you very much, Holly, Claire. I also want to add to this question. And Frank, one thing that I've noticed working with certain government committees is that the e-commerce system would change once we have CBDCs in place. So governments in different countries, they're working to establish their own CBDC, which is a blockchain-based currency system. And they're also trying to bring up their entire supply chain onto the blockchain. So once we have the supply chain and the currency system onto the blockchain, it would be imperative to create a platform which is both compatible with these two systems, and that would greatly transition almost every industry that we know. So e-commerce, as we know it, would change, and once that changed, the e-commerce that you will have in the virtual spaces would also change. So that's how we have Web3 in particular. And when we refer to NFTs, I know that people think about JPEGs of animals. That's not the case anymore. NFTs are just smart contracts. They are programmed contracts. They have their own logic. And once you have that integrated into a transaction or a supply chain, it's just part of everything else that you do. You simply order something, you pay the money, and all of the other transactions, they are conducted by the smart contract automatically, according to the program. And that's it. That's the Web3 that we will be using inside the metaverse. So all of these different fragmented technologies are developing parallelly to each other as of now. But there will come a point when all of them will converge together and create the metaverse that we are envisioning. So things are doing, things are taking their own sweet time. People are doing everything like they can do in different industries, but it's all coming together quite nicely, to be honest. If you look at the bigger picture, it's very clear. Metaverse and Web3 is the future. Now, moving on to the next question, we have from Madhwan Palan. It would be good for communal growth if there is some open source development. Any thoughts? Thanks. So yeah, I think there are several open source projects. Claire, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so open source development in terms of metaverse or digital fashion technology. Blender is open source. That is hugely valuable to designers for creating projects in there. Not open source, but very open is spatial. So yeah, I love open source. I think it's absolutely amazing. I think we'd love to see more open source in everything. I think I'm not 100% clear on sort of, the question, what Madhavan wants.
Yeah. I think what he's trying to say that it might be better if the metaverse is developed with the community. I think most of the metaverses are developed by the community because from what I know about Sandbox and Spatial, half of the content there is user generated. So I think that it's quite open source as of now, and I think a lot of different platforms are coming up. In fact, one of my startups collaborated with Meta and Fiki, which is an organization in India, and it was actually a collaboration to create open source platforms for metaverse and open source tools to build inside the metaverse. And there were more than 50 plus developers in this program, and they all work to develop different platforms which are primarily open source. So a lot of development is already taking place in this industry, in this area. Yeah, I think, Sasha, would you like to add? Yeah, Holly.
Sorry, Sasha, you go.
No, please, I can go after. Go.
Okay. I was going to mention very quickly Boson Protocol. I was working with Boson Protocol recently, and they're the decentralized e-commerce tool. So essentially the Shopify for Web3. So if you do have a metaverse space that you want to add an e-commerce layer to, Boson Protocol is actually a really interesting one to explore. They have stores that you can build like off the back in Decentraland, but they are, if you work directly with them, there are like interoperable stores that they can create for you as well. I know like Ikuska, which is an amazing athleisure brand that actually Claire works with as well. They've been working with Boson recently. So yeah, Boson Protocol is definitely a good one to check out, just because it is open source. So like listing, etc., anyone can do, and it's super simple.
That's interesting. So now we have our next question.
May I just address
that?
Yeah, I think that Claire and Holly really gave great examples. I think to the question, what you're asking is like for communal growth. And when I was saying that I'm a champion of entrepreneurship and truly innovation, and I'm thinking about the tools that we use today versus the tools that we use just to communicate, right? Like Zoom, that most of us are on right now, is in some ways open source, right? In one regard, in the sense of it's opening up and bringing available to us the video conferencing tool that we wouldn't have had if we hadn't had this type of technology evolve over time. So I really, there's great opportunity in game platforms like Roblox, Fortnite, the likes, Spatial, like we've talked, there's many different game platforms that exist but to be a creator in those different ecosystems. And I really believe that when you're actually experimental, so I don't know how many of my co-panelists have experimented in the space, but I imagine they have, because you kind of have to get in there and understand what you're creating for and what you're creating with. And I think it's really important, first case of business, is to, I like that you said the communal in your question, is like develop an understanding of what the community both has to offer and is providing too. I think that's, in the Discord channels and the sub different spheres, that's where the real excitement comes. And I think any savvy business person would develop a lens for what their target audience is, how they can kind of get involved in that. And then I really want to encourage the community. I say Web3 interchangeably, because it is a galaxy again that houses one planet of the metaverse. But the Web3 community is meant to be very welcoming. I've had personal conversations with Claire just to ask her questions on how to get, different areas and across the whole space. There's just so many different individuals. And so I'm saying that the model of this whole transition of business and how we conduct our work life cycle and our creative life cycle is to be collaborative. So I think the very nature of these types of entities, while we're seeing the big organizations broad and outside, I think it's really important to understand that there are a lot of really great communities to dive into, to share. And I do see on the horizon much growth and opportunity in these open source. I think that's absolutely the direction it's moving forward. So just encouraging that as a point of departure and inspiration.
Thank you so much, Sasha, for sharing your thoughts with us. And I absolutely agree with this, that Metaverse is just one planet in the galaxy of the Web3, and also that there's a lot of opportunity in open source development. And this field is definitely going to grow a lot more in the future as well. So we have our last question with us, and we are actually, we do have very little time left with us. So yeah, the last question for today is by Ashwini Satnur. He's asking that would the business methodology be based on business to business and business to consumer online marketplace platforms also? Yeah, so Sasha, would you like to take this out?
Yeah, as I understand it, the question is just, is there a B2B or B2C model across? And I mean, I would just say yes to all. I just mentioned the Camille Louise Jewelry Project. That's digital to direct to avatar actually projects. So there's so many different ways to build in these spaces. I don't really think that there's a no at this point. If there's a no, it's because the technology, just like we're talking about, hasn't been built yet. And so kind of encourage you to go and build it if you see a problem to solve. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of B2B, certainly in enterprise solutions that were coming online. I think it was a couple of years ago, the tool Salesforce launched their Metaverse adjacent, Web3 adjacent enterprise solution to business. I haven't actually operated in that system, but I'm not sure what the digestion rate has been, but it's just interesting to understand that exists. And then certainly the B2C, where we talked just a little bit upon the evolution of e-com and even from the sense of Shopify and these different solutions that are making that leap between a Web2 social media purchase to a Web3 in-game experience or purchase. But I do think that there's a lot of different distribution channels that have yet to be unfolded, and I'm excited to explore those further too.
Thank you so much, Sasha. I think with this session has come to an end. It was lovely speaking with you all. Definitely the industry veterans, and you're shaping this industry as we know. And now I would like to pass on the stage to Apurva. And thank you very much for the lovely audience for staying with us and learning more about Metaverse. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, once again. Yeah.
Thank you, Samruddhi, for moderating such an engaging session. I think I learned so much in this past 1.5 hours about various ways in which Metaverse, I think, already has, but all the more will revolutionize the fashion sector. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our amazing panelists for taking us through this very exciting discussion, which I think will actually be the cornerstone of future standards work on this topic. So thank you so much for taking up the time. I'd like to pass on the floor to Ms. Christina Bhuti. Councillor, I to you for the closing remarks. Over to you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this unique webinar, I'd like to express my gratitude to all the speakers and participants for your active engagement in exploring the exciting intersection of fashion and the Metaverse. I'd like to thank the International Metaverse Council for co-organizing this webinar with ITU. I've spent more of our time online. We seek new ways to express ourselves in the online world, the same we do offline. Fashion allows us to create unique clothing, footwear, accessories, cosmetics, and jewelry to reflect our personality, culture, and society. Now fashion has entered the digital realm. The growth in customizable avatars and digital fashion demonstrates the strong consumer interest in this space. As consumer expectations evolve and the demand of personalized, immersive experiences grows, the Metaverse presents a unique opportunity for the fashion industry to revolutionize their business models, respond to market trends, and better understand custom behavior. An example, just a few weeks ago, Gucci, for example, an Italian brand, during her first ever show led by the new creative director, Sabato De Sarno, decided actually to display their shows on 3 different Metaverse worlds. So this is, I think, a great testimony on how Metaverse can change, the fashion industry, and how more and more, for example, the Generation Z that is used to spend, over 8 hours online, according to latest stats, has embraced digital fashion as really a new trend. At the ITU, we are proud of our commitment to fostering global collaboration and supporting the development of international standards that can enable the digital transformation of all aspects of our life, including fashion. The work of the new ITU focus group on Metaverse is just one example. Since December last year, the focus group has been bringing together over 15,000 experts worldwide, attending the different ITU forums and participating actively in the work of the focus group to work on various aspects of Metaverse and how international standardization can help, to develop a Metaverse that can help to achieve the development sustainable goals. Participation is open to all, and I encourage you to join our Metaverse standardization journey by visiting the ITU Focus Group website and registering to participate actually to the 3rd meeting that will be held physically in Geneva starting on the 3rd of October until the 5th, or you can participate online. In closing, I would like to emphasize the importance of collaboration and partnership in realizing the full potential of the Metaverse in the fashion industry. By working together and sharing knowledge, expertise, and best practices, we can unlock the vast opportunities that the Metaverse offers and ensure that the benefits are enjoyed by all stakeholders. Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. The webinar is adjourned.
Thank you, Ms. Bhuti, for wrapping up the discussions with your remarks and for honestly highlighting the key discussions from today's session. Thank you. Before we conclude this episode, please note that ITU Digital Transformation webinar series will continue to hold episodes. I'd like to invite you for all our future sessions as well. I'm pleased to announce that Metaverse Council will be organizing several additional episodes within this series with ITU, requesting ITU colleagues to kindly provide the link in the chat. Now, lastly, thank you so much, our lovely audience, for staying with us till the end of this session. Wishing everyone a very restful rest of the day. Thank you.